Hello, and thanks for tuning in. You're listening to the Scott Johnson Radio Show on the Building Fortunes Radio and the Humongous Radio Network. Thanks again for listening in. The Scott Johnson Radio Show is featured on Building Fortunes Radio with co-host Peter Mingils and the distinguished host Scott Johnson. We are here broadcasting worldwide, online, to help make the world become a better place. Scott Johnson is famously known for his Stop the Amway Tool Scam efforts, identifying the deceptive business practices of many Amway uplines. From hidden tool profits to lack of retail sales to non-distributors, the Scott Johnson Radio Show explores what's good and bad in the MLM industry. Scott welcomed guests and feedback from just about everyone in the MLM industry, with one absolute definite exception: the lying, social manipulating, YouTube begging, now denying, self-proclaimed previous drug seller, infamous anti-MLM troll, Marco Moukhaiber, besides being sued by several MLM companies, including Primerica, Always Stupid Marco, is the one person who won't be on the Scott Johnson Radio Show. Everyone else, come on and join Scott and Peter for an informative and entertaining conversation about the world of MLM. You'll be able to hear the Scott Johnson Radio Show on the Humongous AM and Humongous FM radio network and on all major platforms, such as Amazon's Audible and Apple Podcasts, Spotify and iHeartRadio, and many of your other favorite podcasts. Share this show with the people that are important to you, and let us help you make a difference in your world. Now on to the Scott Johnson Radio Show. Take it away, Peter.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingils here. You're listening to the Scott Johnson Radio Show, and I love that introduction. It always makes me smile. Puts me in a good mood for this radio show. If you're listening in, you hear us on Building Fortunes Radio. Again, this is Scott Johnson's radio show, but we also post this on all the different all the different radio show domain names we have. There's like 5 of them. Each one of those goes on Amazon and Apple's podcast and Spotify and a whole bunch of other things. And just recently, we figured out how to easily put it on YouTube and Facebook. So you will see this on the Building Fortunes Radio Show. Now, we never really posted a lot of stuff on a series based on Facebook and YouTube because it was just extra work to take an audio and put a video on it and get it done. But we figured out a better way to do it. So you're going to see old episodes and new episodes, including this one, on Facebook's Building Fortunes Radio channel and also YouTube, and I think we'll put it on X, maybe even LinkedIn. I'm not sure how we're going to do it, but if you see us everywhere, it's because we are. And on Saturday nights, 8:30-ish, if you will, Eastern, 7:30 on the Central Side, this is when we do this radio show. And for those people kind of keeping score, I can't believe it's already July 18th of 2026. We're, oh my gosh, we're almost done, not almost done with summer here in Florida, but we're almost done. And we're talking about different and various things as we go. And this whole thing got started almost 11 years ago when I was doing some radio shows with Roger Van Vlissingen, and I called Roger up because he's like an anti-MLM guy but smart. There's a lot of anti-MLM guys that are stupid, but Roger Van Vlissingen's an anti-MLM guy that was smart. So we had him on a couple of different times, and we spoke with him about a couple of different things. Scott Johnson called me up, and he says, there's something that people are missing. And I said, what's that, Scott? He said, the tool scam associated with MLM. And I kind of left Amway 3 separate times because of the focus on books, tapes, and functions, which Scott calls like tools or the system. And I quit Amway, so I wasn't sure if he was talking about the same thing I was thinking about. And when I asked him, do you have a website? He said, yes, I do. StopTheAmwayToolScam.wordpress.com. So that's when I knew that he was talking about the same thing I was thinking about. So we've been doing this radio show ever since. I said, Scott, I don't know how many of these we'll do, because, how much can we talk about tools, as far as the same thing over and over again. And what happened was I didn't realize he was also knowledgeable about MLM. So we found lots of things to talk about. Way back then it was Herbalife and Bill Ackman. That was controversial and entertaining and educational. And then there was Vima. Even though they weren't a publicly traded company, they were going through their thing. And the industry always gives us lots of things to talk about, and we'll talk about many of them here today. But I want to say thanks, Scott Johnson. If it wasn't for him, I probably would not be as knowledgeable as I am, because we do this radio show every week. I've kind of forced myself to make sure I stay on top of the industry, and we have some really interesting things again today, some of which are, I find them fascinating because it kind of helps people understand the legal exposure that sometimes people have when they do the different things if they don't know what they're doing, and we're here to talk about some of those things a little bit later on. So, Scott, thanks for being here on your own radio show.
Peter, thanks for having me. And I did get a notice earlier this week that you had posted a revolving symbol or something like that on YouTube, and I was thinking the same thing that you just said. I was thinking, and I think even it said in the YouTube link that was posted that you're going to be putting a lot more content on YouTube and so forth. So that's really good to hear. That means that if you choose to, you can put all the past 500 plus episodes on YouTube now, and get more exposure. And you said YouTube and Facebook, that'd be awesome. To get on those platforms and more people will see the information. Because I think, in general, the website that you have is kind of behind the scenes. I mean, it's very available and everything. It's just, it's not one of those, massive social media platforms. And so, people just don't find it. But now they'll find it. So that's just an awesome thing to hear. And I'm glad you found an easier way to put the audios on YouTube, because I actually have a few of the earlier audios on YouTube, and I just did it sort of randomly. I didn't pick any particular ones, for my YouTube channel. But then when I tried to put some on there more recently, YouTube rejected it because they said you have an audio and you have to have a video format to do that. And I didn't want to take the time and the effort to learn how and all that to do that. So I'm glad to hear you did that. I thank you very much for doing that so that more people can see these shows. Yeah,
just so people know, like YouTube is video, and the podcast we do is audio. And I like audio. I don't necessarily need to, like Scott, if me and you were here, I don't need to look at you for an hour and a half, and you don't need to look at me for an hour and a half. Besides that, I kind of got stuff going on, so sometimes I have to stand up and I got to go walk around and take out the dog or do something else like that. I could hit mute, and I think audio is great. But I, like you, if I wanted to put something up on YouTube, I had to use these different programs to attach an image to the audio and then render it as an MP4. MP3 is audio, MP4 is video, and it could take me an hour or two or more, especially if it's a longer one, to do all that sort of stuff. And I have lots of other things to do. So I just said, you know what, I'll do it every once in a while, but I won't do it all the time. And now we can do it all the time the way it's done. And it looks pretty cool. So for those people listening in, of course, now I got to say the things that YouTubers say as well. Like it, share it, subscribe to it, so we can increase the exposure. And I'm not necessarily worried about being a viral YouTuber. I'm sure you're not as well. But the extra exposure can certainly help. It helps on the search engines when people are looking stuff up. So even though they see us everywhere now, they'll see us even in more places on the social media platforms too. So I just wanted to kind of sprinkle that in, mostly for people that don't know how this stuff works, and now you do. There you go.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm looking forward to seeing more of those programs that we've done on YouTube, and you said YouTube and Facebook, right?
Yep, both of them there. So if you go to youtube.com/Building Fortunes Radio, you'll be able to find it. And if you go to facebook.com and then you do Building Fortunes Radio, you'll be able to find it there too. So brand new. I have not posted to Facebook in like a million zillion years. I think I've been accused of having 4 or 5 different Facebook sites, and I'm like, well, yeah. Like I didn't remember which domain name or which email address I signed up, so I think I signed up for it again. I couldn't figure it out. I don't remember. We're doing a lot of stuff over here. So if I look like I got a whole bunch of different things all over the place, it's because it is. I never thought the benefit of actually showing stuff about my personal life on Facebook for the world to see and the government to surveil and for Mark Zuckerberg, Schmuckerberg, to be able to grab everything. So I just never did Facebook stuff, and I never did. It made no sense to me to put all my stuff on social media platforms, but a lot of kids and people that act like kids do. But now I don't mind putting the radio shows up. I think it's just a smart move. So anyway, so back to you, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way on 2 points you just made. One is I'm not into the talking head thing. Now, if someone like Julie Anderson that has all those, faces and waves her arms around, I guess you can get a little bit more out of the video, but not really. but yeah, talking heads, I just doesn't do anything for me, because that's mostly what you see on YouTube is talking heads. So if you're, showing something like a, sporting event and you're describing, what's going on the field or something, then certainly that would be, okay. But just a talking head or 2 talking heads, it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm the same way on Facebook. And it's amazing how much really, really personal stuff you see on whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Instagram. I mean, really personal stuff. I saw something recently from Hannah Alonso. She's on YouTube. She's an anti-mlmer, and she recently had a miscarriage, and she's on there crying her eyes out. I'm like, oh, this is really cringe. It's just so uncomfortable because it's so highly personal. But that's what she does, and that's what a lot of, especially women, do, is they put this really personal stuff on these social media sites, and to me, it's just inappropriate, to go to that length. But I guess a lot of these, especially younger people, kind of see social media as their own family. And although, I mean, I don't even think some of the stuff is appropriate for your own personal family, to just talk about endlessly. It's personal and it happened and that's it. You don't have to go into all the details and all the, public now crying, literally crying, on video. It's just, ugh. I'm a different generation though, so maybe I just don't get it, but I don't get it. And while we're on Facebook, let me just say, if you want to go on my Facebook, you won't find any of that personal stuff either, because I set my Facebook up to be, my information on MLMs, particularly Amway. I was in Amway for several years, and I got a lot of information on Amway. And so if you go to facebook.com/Stop the Amway Tool Scam, that's all one word, Stop the Amway Tool Scam, then you'll find, my YouTube channel, different websites I have, some other videos, my phone number, my email, my 2022 input to the FTC when they were looking for product claim and income claim, input for those topics and that sort of thing. And I gave what I believe is the most detailed response. I haven't looked at all 1,600 plus of them, but I looked at the usual suspects, as I call them, and they weren't anywhere near, answering the questions or in any detail. They were just sort of, waving their own flag, how about this type of a thing. Or a lot of the comments in general were just, MLM sucks, and that doesn't really do the FTC much, to help them solve the problem. So anyway, I'm with you. I use my Facebook not for personal things, but for really focused on MLM. And let me do that real quick for the new listeners, because we'd like to tell the new listeners where we're coming from, particularly me. And since we mentioned the tool scam, I'll start with that. And what that is, particularly in Amway, is the upper-level distributors. They call them IBOs now, independent business owners. They sell various things to their downline. They sell tickets to meetings. They sell books. They sell recordings, phone apps, websites, voicemail, all these different things, and they make a ton of money from doing that. And what makes it a scam is that even though they do make a ton of money from doing that, they really don't talk about the amount of money they make. So if you went to any of their meetings, you would come away with the impression that all of their lifestyle came from Amway, the Amway products. And since they don't mention the tools and the profit from the tools, especially if you're a new person, you wouldn't suspect a thing, unless it was someone like you, Peter, because I know, you say you hired and fired yourself 3 times, and what that really means is you joined and quit 3 times because you kind of smelled it kind of fishy, because you had already, had your own selling business, and you had been, looking at motivational stuff and buying it for your own purpose, and maybe for some of your salespeople with Electrolux, and you realize there's benefit here, and I believe there is too, in keeping people motivated and trained on certain principles, particularly in selling. And that's a tough business. Selling is a tough industry, and if you don't either motivate yourself or find outside motivation, you can get down pretty quick. And so, it's a good thing. But it's not a good thing when it's a bait and switch, essentially, in Amway. You're selling all these things, and yet you're not talking about, oh, yeah, this is where I make most of my money. And that's very well documented on my websites. If you go, again, to that Facebook page, there's links to various websites which describe, and my poster child, I call him, a guy by the name of Brig Hart, because he is the largest multiplier that I've come across. All these guys get kicked out. Some of them start talking, and Brig Hart definitely talked. He said, I was making around 10 times more from tools than I was from Amway when I was in Amway. And you'll find similar, quotes, again, from the people who were actually making the money. So this is not me making claims. This is me saying, look what this guy said, look what that guy said. And that's what they all say. It's not always 10 times. Sometimes they use the term several or 4 to 5 times or at least twice as much. But even if it's just twice as much, that's 2/3 of your income. So, think about how much you make yourself personally at your job or your business, whatever you're doing to make money right now. If you were basically lying about the other 2/3 plus, then that's a pretty big lie. And so, anyway, that's the tool scam in a nutshell. And not all MLMs have tool scams, by the way. Amway does, Herbalife does. I'm sure there are others, because a lot of the people with other MLMs came from Amway. So that's kind of in their DNA. But again, it's not universal. However, the thing that is either universal or nearly universal is the issue of lack of retail sales. And let me define what that means, for our purposes here, what a retail sale is. And that is when you sell something for profit, by the way, and I use a minimum of 10% markup to define that, to someone who is not also a distributor. All right, that makes them a customer because they're not eligible for the MLM compensation that you make as a person that's a distributor in an MLM. And it's just like any other, whether it's a brick and mortar or online store, a customer. You give up the money for whatever the product or service is, and you go your separate ways. That's the end of the deal. But a distributor, it's not the end of the deal, because they're trying to do 2 things, at least theoretically, and that is sell to customers as well as bring in new distributors under them so that they can, multiply their efforts. They can leverage their time and their efforts to increase their profitability. That's the whole idea. It's not much different than somebody in a company that's not an MLM but just a regular conventional company, whether they're a supervisor, manager, vice president, or CEO, you are leveraging, your employees, your downline, so to speak, to make more money for yourself. And even though it's not as defined as an MLM, as far as an income model, like an income disclosure statement or a map of how you, rise through the ranks of an MLM, it's the same concept, because, you're not let's say, 300 times more productive as a CEO, even though you're being paid that much more maybe than a typical employee, it's because of the wisdom and knowledge you've gained, at least theoretically, which allows you to be paid 300 times more, because your knowledge is that much more valuable than a lower level employee. And that's why, people like CEOs get paid hundreds of times more, because their wisdom, their knowledge is worth that amount of money. Just like in an MLM, at least theoretically, someone that's higher in the ranks because of their experience and wisdom, and they are training their downline, there should be money paid for that. And that's how MLMs work too. So it's just kind of crazy how people who criticize MLM don't really understand why they should be criticizing MLMs. And it's really when there's a lack of retail sales to customers in an MLM. I'm going to switch to that now. That if you don't have retail customers, what you really have is an illegal pyramid. And we had a really nice recent example of that because it was a gifting scheme called BINT. BINT stands for Blessings in No Time. And these are just where you put money in the pot, and then if you can get enough people under you that are doing the same thing, you can cash out for the big bucks. And that's how a gifting scheme, which is known to be highly illegal, works. And now we have a couple that was in charge of this thing, and they both got sentenced to 40 years in prison, federal prison, so they're going to serve most of that time. And it was like I think a $10 or $20 million Ponzi scheme, essentially. Actually, it wasn't really a Ponzi scheme; it was an illegal pyramid, slightly different, but same general idea. And you look at the MLMs; they're doing much more than 10 or 20 million, but they might do 10 or 20 million in a month or even a week. So, and these people got 40 years. But again, if you take out the concept of a gifting scheme, because MLMs generally have products or services, but they're also generally overpriced. And if you split up that money, as far as the legitimate part that you're paying for the product or service, and then you take away the remainder, the overpriced portion of that product or service, it's really identical to a gifting scheme. So, to me, an MLM that doesn't have retail sales is a gifting scheme with products. And why the FTC and FBI, don't understand that concept, because I've explained it to them multiple times. I need to explain it to them again with this BINT judgment. I haven't done it recently. To sort of really drive that point home, to make them understand, hey, guys, this is really similar here. This is not rocket science. This is not something that, it takes an electrical engineer that used to work in the nuclear power industry, which is me, by the way, to understand this. And it's really not a complicated thing. It's really quite simple. So anyway, now, the next natural question is, well, how much retail sales is enough? If you're a new listener, you say, well, Scott, how many retail sales do I need to be considered enough? And that's a decent question. And so the answer, from my perspective, this is not an FTC policy, unfortunately, is they settled with two companies back in 2016. I think it was just coincidentally, and I think you mentioned them earlier. It's Vima and Herbalife. And in both cases, and it's not exactly this way, but it's pretty close, that the FTC and these two companies both agreed in separate settlements that if you had at least 50% of your products being purchased by customers versus purchased by distributors, that would satisfy the FTC. And the FTC has refused to make that a generic rule across the whole industry for reasons I don't agree with or understand, actually, that would be adequate. So yes, if every individual distributor had at least as much sales to customers as they were consuming in their own personal household, then that would meet that 50% criteria, and you would be a legitimate MLM. And that's why, we like to say that we're pro-MLM if it's done right, and we're anti-MLM if it's done wrong. And for me, the two biggies is the retail sales, minimum of 50%, and then the tool scam. If you want to make the money, go for it with the tools, but you have to make that known to your downline. And I think, both Amway and the upline don't want to do that, because then everybody would leave, or enough people would leave, or the whole thing would collapse. And so, with those two criteria, to me, you're a legitimate MLM. Now, you could be doing things like making incredible product claims or incredible income claims that are not legal, and that's why the FTC likes to focus on those two things. But those two things would kind of be an afterthought. If you cleaned up those other main things, the retail sales and the tool scams, I don't think that those problems would be significant at all. And if they were, there'd be so fewer MLMs for the FTC to investigate, it would be really easy for them to do that. So anyway, I'll stop there, because we do have a great some content to go over on the show. And Peter, I'll let you make any comments, and then we can get ahead with that.
Nope, we're all good. So let's get started.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess I want to do this just because he's our favorite guy. There's a guy out there called Always Marco, and he made a video recently. I guess it was about a week ago. But anyway, he's talking about different things, and, as Marco always does. And at one point, he likes to do impressions of Patrick Bet-David, right? This is a guy that used to own a big MLM insurance company. He sold it or sold parts of it or something. I think he still has some kind of an interest in it. But he's kind of a famous commentator now is what he does. That's kind of what he does now as he talks. And, he's a very, well-informed guy. I'm not saying he just talks and talks. He knows a lot of things. But anyway, he has a sidekick called Rob. And Rob was, kind of his behind-the-scenes guy. And Patrick Bet-David is well known for, when he wants to find something on, maybe it's a video on YouTube, or maybe he wants to, find a document online or something, and he would, often say, "Hey, Rob, pull that up," and Rob would go out and, find what he's referring to, and then they would put it on the screen and talk about it. So Rob was kind of just his sidekick, behind-the-scenes guy. And Marco liked to do impressions of Patrick Bet-David, and he would often say, "Pull it up, Rob," kind of poking fun at the whole thing. And so what happened recently, and we were talking right before the show, Peter, and I think you nailed this. Recently, Rob left Patrick Bet-David. He went to do something else. But what happened was somehow when he did leave and he got, a job with another outlet, who I don't even know who that was, that somebody, and we don't know who it was, called this new employer and said, "Well, Rob, has done this, this, and this," and so he got fired from this new thing. So now he's looking for another job, but he's got this reputation now online, and we don't even know what the accusations were. We don't know anything. But what I think you were correct about, Peter, was it was right around the same time frame as when Patrick Bet-David got into some hot water over this Goliath Ventures thing that went under. I mean, it was a big scam that went under. It's definitely a scam, and it's gone now. And Patrick Bet-David was getting like $1 million for these guys to be promoted on his valuetainment. He does like an annual, what's the name of it? Do you recall the name of the annual thing that he does?
They call it the Vault. It's big for him. It's big. It's his biggest event of the year.
Yeah, it's an annual event. It's big, and apparently these guys wanted to pay him $1 million, to get some promotion. And they did pay the $1 million, and they did get the promotion, but then they got into the hot water and went under. I mean, the company, I believe, no longer exists. And so, Patrick David, he was, he got some criticism. I think it was well earned, because, and he even said, I vetted these guys and we didn't see the problem with them. And it was a pretty obvious thing, to me at least. And I think it should have been obvious to Patrick David. But again, it was the same time frame that Rob left. And so we don't know what happened, but the timing of it is very, interesting, let's call it that this happened around the same time frame, and we have no idea if this was even connected, but the timing was there. So different theories you could come up with. One was, maybe Rob was involved in the vetting, and he didn't do a good job, and so, Patrick cut him loose. Or maybe he told Patrick David, hey, this is not a good company, and he went ahead with it anyway, and maybe they got sideways somehow. Or maybe it had nothing to do with this, and maybe Patrick David just got offered another thing, or maybe Rob said, hey, it's getting a little warm in the kitchen here. I think I'm going to go, find another opportunity. So we have no idea. It could have been even something I didn't mention, We don't know. Maybe he was, chasing the skirt in the office like you mentioned it. We don't know. But the timing is very interesting. So anyway, I say all of this to get back to Marco, because Marco's talking about this on his channel, and Marco's been chasing Rob around, trying to get him on his channel for at least a month, ever since, Rob left, because, Marco wants to get dirt on Patrick David. And so he wanted to get Rob on his channel. This is Marco, so that he could, put some shade on Patrick. So anyway, Rob has not gone in the show yet because I think he doesn't really trust Marco. Anyway, the interesting part about this whole thing, this is just kind of the lead up, is Marco was complaining about, and he thinks it was Patrick David, or somebody with that company is the one that got Rob fired from his new position. And Marco was saying, it's really interesting. If you have a disagreement, that's one thing. But then to just, throw the guy under the bus after he gets a new job, that's just dastardly. That's just, really underhanded, and, that's just being a bad person. And I'm thinking, gee, that's interesting, Marco. Because I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, when I got sideways with you a little bit for being stupid, then you called Peter at 1 a.m. and pretended to be somebody else. This is Easter morning, by the way, 1 a.m. You called Peter pretending to be somebody else, wanting my phone number, me, Scott, because you had lost it and we were buddies and you were trying to get a hold of me, and it's just one big fabricated lie until the very end you said, I'm not really this other guy, I'm really Marco, I'm really stupid Marco, and you've been had, and he's talking to you now, Peter, you're, I don't know what he called you, idiot or something. And
I remember.
And then he hung
Trust
up.
me, I remember at the end.
I'm sure you remember. And then he hung up. And I think he still has this video on his own channel, because it was a live show, because he had you on his channel live, and I was trying to text you at the time. Of course, you weren't watching it because you were on the phone with Marco. But anyway, for Marco to have such a lack of self-awareness that he basically did the same exact thing, and now he's complaining what he thinks Patrick David did to Rob. So anyway, it's kind of a long story, but it takes a little bit of explanation for people who don't know Marco, because a lot of people who used to follow Marco don't. So what the people following him now have no idea of his history. They have no idea that he did a video of being a cocaine dealer and later did a video on his own channel again, and then denied being a cocaine dealer. He's taken down both of those videos. So if you're a new follower of Marco, you have no idea that he made those videos, that he ripped off pizza joints and coffee joints and airlines and telephone companies, and he bragged about it on his lives, which he's taken down now, but, we have the videos and all of that. So anyway, I'll hand it back to you. I'll stop talking.
That's a perfect example. I'll comment on the Patrick Bet-David saga with Rob. So we don't know anything, and we always talk about, unless we know all the variables, any conclusion we draw is probably wrong. So it could be one of many things like you just mentioned. It could be Rob did something wrong. Maybe he looks like a nice guy, but it's a degenerate. Maybe there's an office party, they get drunk, he hits on somebody, I don't know. But Rob looks like a good guy, and I can't see it. It always looked like he was working hard, but we don't know because that's just what we see. We don't see the stuff that has to be behind the scenes. So Rob leaves. They really never mentioned that. I don't think they've ever addressed the idea that Rob's gone. They just talked about guys. Patrick Bet-David, when he would say, guys, can you pull up this? Or guys, can you do this? So they went from Rob, can you do this, to guys, which was very uncomfortable for anybody paying attention. But if you weren't paying attention, didn't know the backstory, you wouldn't know the difference. And then I kind of noted when he left. And that, I don't know, it could be anything. Maybe he needed more money, maybe he got a better offer, it could be anything, right? We don't know. But he left around the time when Patrick Bet-David was getting nailed in public opinion for sponsoring the Goliath Ventures guy by Danny DeHeck and other people as well, even by CoffeeZilla. So did he leave because of that? We don't know. Here's what I do know, that the Chris Delgado guy who was running Goliath Ventures was arrested, probably going to go to jail for a very, very, very long time, was certainly guilty, and was running. Anybody that looked at it would see it was something nefarious, at least, illegal certainly, and they certainly were doing a lot of screwy things. So anybody that looked at it, and if Patrick Bet-David is some smart business consultant, I mean, you don't even need to investigate it. You just look at it. And I always use the expression, if you see it right away, no explanation is necessary. If you don't see it right away, no explanation is possible. Well, anybody looking at what Goliath Ventures was doing and Chris Delgado and the way he acted and different things, you just look at it and you just say, there's something wrong with this. And Patrick said he spoke to a lot of people. And I'm not, okay, Patrick, you're not that naive, because I've seen Patrick investigate people that said they were him and wound up after 20 or 30 minutes uncovering that they weren't him. So Patrick's not that stupid. He thinks we are by the things that he says. And the reality is I think the heat got pretty hot. And I betcha a lot of people were subpoenaed. Now, that's a big thing. So when, like, the Department of Justice says, we want to see all of your text messages, and we want all the people in Valuetainment or PBD podcast or whatever it might be, they're subpoenaing emails. There's a lot of shit going on. And as far as being exposed, and those guys, I am sure, are guys. Like, they're probably pretty comfortable with some of the things. So there's probably some issues that are out there that are challenging. And I just suspect that if Rob was basically fired by his new employer, there might be some things out there that are tied into Goliath Ventures. I'm not knowledgeable enough to say what, but I can tell you that I believe that there is. So we'll see. And Marco has no clue. Marco just thinks that it's Patrick Bet-David going after Rob, and I don't know if that's true. I think Patrick Bet-David is much smarter than that to go after him in that regard, like a jealous employer or maybe a revengeful employer, because Patrick Bet-David realizes that Rob's been working with you for a long time. That shit's going to hit the fan. And even though you say you could sue him, that shit's going to hit the fan. It's not going to be a good thing for a minority owner of the New York Yankees, which is what Patrick Bet-David is, or somebody who's aspiring to bring Valuetainment to $1 billion company, which I don't know. So, Patrick's getting some people that are fighting against him, especially with this Goliath Ventures thing, and it's going to be rekindled and resurfaced, I'm sure. I think the vault is happening again. It's going to be kind of curious to see how things are spoken about or not spoken about relative to that. So that's just one thing that I want to say. Now, then I will switch to Always Stupid Marco. I'll share with you. I've seen plenty of really tone-deaf, completely ignorant people, and Marco is like my poster child. That's why we like to pick on him. Besides the idea that he did what he did to me, He's just a really great example of somebody who is totally not conscious of anything that's even smart. I'll use an example. He's wondering, I got sued by these MLM companies, and I'm not really sure why. And he tries to change the narrative, so watch the manipulation on his part. For all the new listeners, he's changing the narrative. I don't know why they're coming after me, he says. All I'm trying to do is, unveil all the horrible things that these MLM companies are doing. I don't know why they sued me. Well, we do, Marco, because we were on those videos and we watched them. And the things that you did, harassment, slander, defamation, threats, like way out of line threats, those are the reasons why you were sued. And you are either just fucking stupid or you are just manipulating your audience trying to rewrite this narrative because anybody that was around any of those could see what you did. That's number one. Number two, I have a really hard time listening to his business logic because somebody who's never run a business, meaning him, never really had a consistent person on a payroll that talks anything about pricing and business and anything, who has also been sued and doesn't recognize why he's being sued, and also at his age has a negative self-worth, probably in the tens of thousands of dollars because of the lawsuits, and they're growing, and is not conscious of any or all of that sort of stuff, and continues to do the things that he does, has no clue. I mean, he's totally just taking advice from Marco Moukhaiber other than, like, here's how you edit a video, or here's how you clip a clip, which he thinks is very valuable now that he's selling his courses or his advice or whatever, trying to gain any kind of money that he's gaining. Anybody that takes any advice from him other than how to upload a video or how to clip a video or how to fill out a form, I would say, you probably find somebody else. If you're paying anybody, pay anybody else, because you can't pay him for business advice. You certainly can't pay him for advice as far as counseling is concerned. Certainly can't pay him for, like, his advice on women or men, because I think he's had relationships with both, and I don't see any of those working out very well. So the reality with Marco is he's just fun to pick on, but for the new goons that are listening in, realize that he's rewriting the narrative. And just for the record, what tipped me off relative to Marco on that fateful day, here it is. It's Easter morning. My granddaughter's sleeping over, and I get a phone call from somebody who says he was looking for you and says, hey, can I ask you some questions about MLM? So I spent about an hour and a half on the phone answering questions with him about MLM, and I wouldn't give him your phone number. And I put the phone down because I wasn't looking at while he was calling me at now 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was. And I could probably, write him off as just being a dick or being an asshole or just some fucking troll. But it was when he was done and he called me a fucking idiot. That was it. So if anybody wants to know the trigger point, that was it. And I'd recommend people go to buildingfortunesradio.com, look for the deep dives, find the ones on Marco, because they are priceless. So for anybody that's wondering, that's why. Now, the other reason why we pick on Always Stupid Marco is because, and Scott, I think we're both on the same page, is I'm not going to pick on a girl. I'm just not going to do it. There's even Julie's crazy. Like, she's a mental case, allegedly or definitely. I'm not sure, but Julie's crazy. I'm not going to pick on Julie. We'll call her nutcase, like you did on the radio show, that we were on. I'll call her crazy. I think she's got some mental issues, and I think she'd think that as well. I'm not going to pick on the other ones like Savannah Marie or C.C. Suarez or Julie Joe or D.C. or what's the other one? There's Helena Anzo. Even though they're worth picking on, I just don't want to pick on girls. So we'll pick on Marco, so he'll be the focus point, and deservedly so. And he's so fucking stupid. In the background noise that he plays on his radio shows with my voice, when I say, fuck it, Marco, fuck it, go do it, Marco, that was the episode where we were prompting him to do the video that got him sued. So he fell into it. We were kind of coaxing him. Go do it, Marco. Go post that video. You know the one that's going to get your ass sued. And you're so fucking stupid you don't realize that you're going to get your ass sued and you think you have nothing and you're safe. Wait. So just have that, Scott. I'll get off my little rant. But for those people that are just listening and wondering, now this is also on YouTube, Marco's home place. And, one last thing. Marco says something, I got about 123,000 subscribers. Well, here's the way I look at this. And I'm going to point this back to Matt Cox, whose video he was on recently, his channel he was on recently. We predicted correctly that Marco's video on Matt Cox was probably going to be one of the shortest ones that Matt Cox has ever had, and we were right. And it was also probably going to be the least viewed that Matt Cox has ever had inside True Crime, and we were right. And the idea that he's got about 40,000 views, or 42,000 views, which is a lot of views, starting from zero, like us on my YouTube channel, which we really never push. I got the name. I reserved the name, Building Fortunes Radio, because I needed to make sure that we would have it, but I really never did anything with it to speak of. So I'm not worried that we had less than 100 subscribers and never pushed it. And we're mostly audio, it wasn't video. But the idea that he gets 40 people or 30 people or 87 people on a live and, less than 10,000 views tells us a little bit about his base of audience listeners. Marco, you don't have a growing channel, you have a dying channel. YouTube doesn't take away subscribers when they don't look at you anymore. So if you clicked on it, you got it. And most of the subscribers you got, that big bump, was when you made the video that got you sued. So they were controversial. They went kind of viral because they were controversial. You got sued. They're not even there anymore. But YouTube doesn't take away the subscribers that you gained when you got sued. So you're not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. You don't have 123 legit subscribers. You got a fraction of that and a bunch of local goons that don't know really who you are. So, Scott, I ranted for a little bit, but there you go.
That was excellent. I forgot that quote that he likes to play was the one that got him sued. That is classic. Another reason we don't pick on the other reason we don't pick on the women is we don't need to, because whether it's the women or Marco, they all pretty much have the same complaints about MLM, which are off base. So rather than watching, like you say, all these multiple women and all the videos they make that are anti-MLM, we just have to watch Marco because he encompasses the same arguments. So it's kind of a time saver, as well as, he's also the biggest jerk among them. Most of them are pretty clueless, but at least they're not jerks about it. And so, we focus on Marco because he's earned all of those stripes. So anyway, yeah, that's a good recap, Peter, for the people to hear. And you actually led me right in to the Patrick David part of it, because in this Marco video that I was mentioning, it was about a week ago, that he goes on after he made a fool of himself with the first part that we just talked about. He's going on in his video, and it's around a third or halfway through, and it's a 3-hour-plus video, so it's kind of painful to listen to. But there's always these little nuggets in Marco's videos. So he's doing this live, right? And one of his goons, his followers, he calls them goons, like the mafia goons. Now that has a new definition in the modern, that vocabulary. Gooning is now a different term. People can look that up. But anyway, one of his goons says,
Let me save them the time. Hold on one second. Let me save people the time of looking it up. So
okay.
If there's a kid listening in, cover his ears. So a goon is somebody who jerks off watching a video. So guess what? Marco's got plenty of goons, and they praise it, and I would not be surprised if that's the case. But anyway, I just had to say that, Scott, for those people that I wanted to save them the time, because I'm a nice guy. Save them the time of having to look it up.
There you go.
So go ahead.
You're not know what a goon is. So anyway, one of his goons makes a comment during this live that Marco's doing, and he was on, again, he being Marco was on Patrick Bet-David's channel like 3 years ago, and then also about 3 weeks ago. And so, Marco on both occasions was an anti-MLMer. And so this goon says, "Hey, Marco, Patrick Bet-David just threw you under the bus." And Marco sees this comment, and during the live, he pulls up the video that Patrick Bet-David was doing. Now it's Patrick Bet-David on someone else's channel. But he's talking to this guy, and he's saying, yeah, this guy is just going overboard, and he's kind of, wacko crazy about MLMs. I don't even understand what he's talking about, and he's just really throwing Marco under the bus. And Marco's playing this on his own video, and I just found it to be hilarious. And then if you go a little bit further, a few minutes into the video, another goon makes a comment that says, "Hey, Marco, here's another channel that's making fun of you." And it's these two guys in a very small channel. I think there was like 70 views on this video, but it's a guy that was in the insurance industry for 14 years, and he's also throwing Marco under the bus. Now, this is playing on Marco's live stream, which is still up, by the way. You can still watch all of this stuff. And this guy's saying, yeah, this guy, I'm not going to mention his name, but, if he comes across me, I'm pretty willing to talk to him, but I'm not going to mention his name. He's just whacked out on this anti-MLM stuff. He's just kind of a, nut job, whatever he was calling Marco, and, just kind of like, this guy's just lost it and all of this stuff. And he said, and I knew it was Marco right away because it's either Marco, there's this other gay guy on YouTube, I can't even remember his name, and I haven't even seen much from him, not that I follow him or anything, but he's also, over the years, been an anti-MLM person, but it's mostly women, so it's like, it's either Marco or the women. That's all you're going to find as far as anti-MLM on YouTube. And I'm thinking this has to be Marco. But then he clinches it. This insurance guy, he clinches it. And he says, yeah, this guy is such a weirdo. The reason he got into anti-MLM because his best friend in high school joined an MLM, and then Marco went online and looked up this MLM, and he tried to tell his friend that, hey, I found this information, and this insurance MLM is a scam, and that ruined their friendship, and that's what caused him to go down this anti-MLM rabbit trail, and it's just kind of weird. Why would you, after breaking up with your friend, go on this anti-MLM rant? And he started questioning whether Marco had this friend or if it was his boyfriend, because he was taking it to such an extreme. Now, Marco has, on his own channel, mentioned that he's bisexual, so these guys might be onto something without even knowing they're onto something. But I'm just laughing at Marco putting both of these people that are throwing him under the bus on his live stream. And I've only gone through half of this video, Peter. I don't know if there's any other nuggets later on, but I'm looking forward to watching it to see, how else Marco has, again, just a total, just not understanding that he's making himself look stupid. That's why we call him Always Stupid Marco, is, rather than taking these two comments and either ignoring them or saying, hey, I'll look at them later, he puts them on air on his own channel as he's doing this live stream. And it's just so funny, watching him be so stupid. I was just cracking up watching all this stuff. So anyway, I'll stop there because we do have something else we want to talk about. But I'll let you make many other comments about that part of Marco's video.
Very good. No, I'm kind of always impressed on how really not knowledgeable he is, and lives up to his Always Stupid name. So for those people listening in, all you have to do is listen to a few minutes, and I love when he gives business advice, or now he's charging for courses and doing different things and overpriced himself. I think he said he charges like $400 for a 90-minute session. to show people how to do whatever and justifies it that his value is going to give them more than $400. So I don't know how he justifies this, but he's obviously got to do everything possible to try to make some extra money to pay for the lawyers in the 3 separate lawsuits that he's got, and maybe counting. Probably a new one dropping any minute now. So so back to anything else you want to talk about, Scott? I'm done with Marco.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt he's selling very many, if any, of these things. And not only does he have at least $30,000 or $40,000 and growing to his lawyers, his multiple lawyers on multiple lawsuits, but he also has an $800,000 judgment against him.
True.
So, I mean, at this point, the judges, the lawyers kind of pale in comparison to this $800,000 judgment that he has. So, but yeah, his problems are growing exponentially. But we'll get off of that and we'll move on to the Bricks and Minifigs. This is kind of a big deal on YouTube right now, and there's just a lot of chit chat going on multiple channels. I mean, I looked at 1 or 2 of them. I'm sure there's many, many more that are talking about this thing that's going on, that has been going on, I guess, for a couple, 3 months now. So Bricks and Minifigs is basically a store, and I guess it's kind of it's kind of like McDonald's. It's kind of its own brand, and what it really is these Lego stores that, for copyright and trademark reasons, they can't use the Lego name, and so they name it Bricks and Minifigs. But it's really Legos and all of these specialty Legos. And apparently this elderly guy, I call him elderly, I'm getting up there myself. So anyway, he's, I think, in his late 70s. I think he got cancer, and he sold a couple. He didn't sell them. He put on consignment a couple $100,000 worth of Star Wars Legos, for this store in Oregon to sell, so that he could, get some money to pay for his medical bills. And apparently the store was selling some of it, but not paying him. And then the store in Oregon decided to move to Europe and just basically hand the store back over, to corporate. And now this guy is trying to tell corporate, hey, these guys owed me money. And the corporate people are saying, well, we bought the store, but we didn't buy all these contracts, so you're out of luck, pal. And so now this guy called Reckless Ben, and I don't know him in detail, but apparently he has this reputation for going after, scam artists and so forth, and exposing them, and getting attention put on them, rightly so. And so now he became aware of this guy, I think through one of his followers, said, hey, Reckless Ben, you need to go after this Bricks and Minifigs outfit and see if you can get this elderly, cancer-ridden patient some of his money back so he can pay for his medical bills. And so Reckless Ben said, will do. And so that's what got him onto this, right? And so he goes in and tries to, get attention brought to the store and the corporation and so forth. And part of this is going after the person that bought out the store from the original owners. And this guy is in Utah. He's a Mormon, and that's important. And so different things went on. I won't go into the details because you can watch the videos yourself. But what happens, this is my opinion, is that the Mormon Mafia goes after Reckless Ben. And they've got the police on their side, they got the judges on their side, and the real coup de grace here is that I believe what happened was that the American Fork Police, that's the city in Utah where this is based, apparently by accident, well, I'm sure it's by accident, they posted the unredacted videos, like the cameras that the police wear, and also the cameras inside the squad cars. And normally they would redact a lot of this stuff and only put online for public consumption, what they want you to see. But there's all this other stuff now that's been made available, and the lawyers love it, right? The lawyers eat this stuff up because they work really hard to get this kind of stuff because it takes lawsuits, it takes, subpoenaing people, subpoenaing records, and, there's resistance to this, and it's a lot of work to get these kinds of records normally, but it's being served up on a platter, and so the lawyers are all over the place going after this stuff and making YouTube videos, and it's really, really interesting. It's not really the Lego story, because me personally, I told you this before the show, I think the whole Legos thing and the Star Wars Lego and the different themes, to me it's just kind of nuts. It's kind of like, to me personally, it's childish. Legos to begin with is childish, and then you get the Star Wars and whatever other themes, you put on top of it. But like I told you, Peter, this is America, and if that's what you're into, go for it. It's freedom. That's what we're all about. Me personally, I think it's just juvenile. But if that's what, floats your boat, go for it. So that's how I look at it. But it's really all this legal stuff that's going on, and you get to see the lawyers talking about the legal process and hiring these expert, civil rights lawyers that have a lot of experience, deep experience in federal courts across the country, and they're kind of giving their 2 cents. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed this, Peter, but in the video clip I sent you, the lawyer was promoting one of Ben's teammates, I'll call him, because he started a fundraising effort, GoFundMe, and as the video was being made, it was like 2 days old. I think it's probably 3 days old now, and he had raised just under $20,000, and I think they were going for at least $20,000. But the lawyer that was being talked to on this video, that's the expert, he says, "Yeah, I need to have at least $100,000." Now I checked on this yesterday, so this is like 2 days after the video was made. They're up over $124,000. I haven't checked it today. I wouldn't be surprised. I'll let you make some comments and I'll look it up, but I'll bet you it's well over maybe $200,000 by now. And I'll look it up as you're making comments. But as people get to see these channels and the publicity, they're like, I'm in on it. I'm going to give some money to this lawyer so that he can go after, the Bricks and Minifigs people. So anyway, I'll stop there and let you make comments, because we could talk about this all night with the different aspects of this particular story. But I'll let you make some comments, and I'll look up this GoFundMe, and I'll report back on the show on what it's up to now. But go ahead and give some of your,
sure.
Because I know you've been listening to other people on this too, making comments on this whole story. So go right ahead.
So we, meaning me and you, kind of addressed the Bricks and Minifigs when it first came out. So we talked about it when it was like literally brand new. I'm sure it was during the first week, because I was kind of fascinated with the topic and I saw where it was going. And it is really a great example. So it's kind of addicting in a good way, but not a good way, if you know what I mean, because you might spend too much time on it. But it really is a great case study. It should be a college course on the legal system and human behavior and how things go crazy. So one of the observations that I'll point out that you might eventually get to, meaning if you're listening in, but there's people that are passionate about their jobs and what they do, and their passion doesn't always line up with the law. And that happens with the owners of Bricks and Minifigs, the owners of the franchise of Bricks and Minifigs, Reckless Ben, the people that do the videoing for Reckless Ben. And the benefit here is you have Reckless Ben, who is a young man who's pretty smart, but not in all areas, and successfully has closed down businesses, unlike Marco, who hasn't done any of this sort of stuff, and Marco's certainly not very smart. But he is learning and manipulating and trolling the systems in place, and he's doing it in a way that's very entertaining. Might get himself in big-ass trouble, but he's going to live up to the name Reckless Ben. But there's a couple of things here. So I'm going to pick on the police for just a second, because the police, there's good ones and there's bad ones. And in the Reckless Ben story, especially the video that you sent me, Scott, you could see the good ones and the bad ones. So you see the ones that are, hungry for power, and they're going after Reckless Ben because he's some YouTuber and he's picking on some guy, meaning this homeowner, Josh, and some other people, and they think he's just, Reckless Ben is a bad guy, so they're protecting the community. So their goal to protect the community is, sometimes good people do bad things, and they're doing a whole bunch of stupid stuff, not realizing that all of this is being recorded, which is to Ben's credit and everybody around Ben, because he's a YouTuber and he's got video cameras going all the time. So through a series of crazy events, now all of a sudden lawyers are looking at this, because when the police do something wrong, they're going to point it out, and they're really good at pointing it out. And the police did things that were right, and they did things that were wrong. And you could look at their motivation, the same thing over there. You take a look at the things that, the people that Reckless Ben kind of grabbed along the way. But the backstory is somewhat fascinating. I'm going to kind of go into Reckless Ben's fans. The video you sent me was the one where they needed to serve Josh, one of the owners of the Bricks and Minifigs that they were talking about, the new owner. They needed to serve him, and they came up with a creative way to get him out of his house. And the creative way to get him out of his house was they made a sign with his picture on it, and they put it across the street on a neighbor's fence, because they knew he would come outside to rip the sign down, and then they'd be able to serve him with the papers, because he wasn't coming out of his house to be served. So this kind of like a little bit of a clever, I won't call it genius, just clever on some of the things that he did. And then you'll see the unwilling or unwitting victims here. The woman whose fence that they put this on, they called her and told her they were doing it for some fundraising event, and she's a nice person and doesn't really understand the language. She said yes without seeing the sign. So it's kind of crazy in a fun way if you weren't involved in the whole story. But there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out. The guy that did the sign and put it up, who says it was his idea, he wanted to help Ben, and Ben couldn't do anything because he was considered stalking. This guy literally took the last, I think he said $2,000 he had in his life to go do it, and then wound up bailing out Ben. And you're like, wow, these YouTubers are totally committed to this cause with this narrative that Reckless Ben has told about the Legos being stolen by this horrible company called Bricks and Minifigs. So it's like a real mess. And here's the parts that are worth noting is the people at Bricks and Minifigs, this Josh guy, really did bring a lot of this on himself. And now Josh is saying these people are stalking me. They're looking in my windows. My 5-year-old daughter is having nightmares. My wife is freaking out. So this is just another great example of how when you fuck around, you're going to find out. And when things escalate, they're going to escalate. And a lot of this stuff is happening. And now we're at the place where it went from a small little issue that should have been handled to a very large issue where there's a lot of lawyers going to be involved, a lot more YouTube, maybe even Reckless Ben, depending on the judges, might actually be found guilty of some felonies. So it's worth watching from afar, but it also just kind of shares with you how crazy this stuff actually gets. So it's everything from non-disclosure agreements to what you can say as far as disparaging to trespassing to whatever. And it's worth, why do we bring it up here besides the interest? There's a lot of people in MLM that don't want to put themselves in this position because it really can escalate to a place where you really might not be able to stop it, to a place where you certainly can't afford it, and it's going to control the next 2 to 5 years of your life at least. So I don't think anybody wants that. So it's just a mess, and it all really, quite honestly, comes, if I'm going to pick on anybody from what I've seen so far, it's the Bricks and Minifigs company owners that didn't do the right thing, and they didn't realize because they didn't do the right thing that this is going to escalate, and it's really escalated. And now it's uncovering under rocks of things that people never saw. Because you get the internet sleuths going after things, and now they're pulling up previous lawsuits, who really owns the company, other stuff like this, and it's escalating like out of control. It's like, projectile vomit or projectile diarrhea all over the place. I mean, people getting splattered all over the place, and people that are hooked into this are starting to jump onto it. So it's really a phenomenon that's happening. And we were at the very beginning of it, Scott, on Building Fortunes Radio on the Scott Johnson Radio Show. So back to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many fascinating aspects to this. One thing that kind of struck me as interesting towards the end of that Part 5 video that I sent to you is that Reckless Ben, I think he has a good heart. I think he's kind of naive, but he has a good heart. And one of the things he mentioned to the lawyer when he's talking to him is, I could sue these guys and I could make a lot of money from, if I sue the police, because they did do some stuff wrong, I believe. I mean, it's pretty blatant how they turn their body cameras off at certain points for no good reason. I'm sure that's against, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's against the police department policy and everything. And I'm sure there was just a lot of conversation going on that, they're going to get subpoenaed for. What did you say right after you said that? We're going to have to come up with a lot of, I forgot. I don't remember. They're going to be saying that a lot. Anyway, at one point, this is something that I think that Reckless Ben understood very well. It's true. He says, if I sue the police department and I win and I get a lot of money, then it's really not coming from the police department. It's really coming from the citizens, the taxpayers of that city. American Fork is where the city is. And, it's coming from the insurance company if they're insured. It's not really coming from the police themselves. It's really coming from the taxpayers. So if anything, if I get, a big judgment, what I want to do is do something for the city citizens, do something for them. Like, I don't think you mentioned anything specifically, but, I'm thinking of things like, maybe upgrade a park or build a new park or, do something, build a skateboard park or whatever, whatever the interest, pretty classy for him to do that, for him to understand that even if I make money from this, it's not really coming from the police department. It's not coming from the people I'm suing. It's really coming from the tax-paying citizens of that city, either directly or indirectly, through the insurance or through bonds or, whatever. It's not coming from the police department themselves. And maybe they'll make some policy changes. Maybe those will be temporary. Maybe they'll half-heartedly do it and then go right back to their old behavior. And it didn't really sit well with him. And I was just watching the lawyer as he was saying this, because the lawyers are like, oh, yeah, no, you should really take that money and run with it. They didn't say that, but you could see it in their eyes, like, because that they're going to make a lot of money, the lawyers, right? But that's their job. That's what they get paid for. But it would have been kind of nice for the lawyer that was interviewing Ben while he's saying this to say, you know what, that's really a nice thing to say. And, I'm going to give half of what I'm going to get paid, and I'll make that contribution along with you. That would have been a really nice thing for a lawyer to say, but they didn't say that. So maybe they'll say it in the future. And it does cost money. I mean, I'm not saying they should just give away their time and their money, because that is how they make a living. But rather than making a big profit from this particular case, why not follow Reckless Ben and make at least part of what you win from this case, if you win it, and help Ben contribute to the city, to the citizens. That would have been a nice gesture, and maybe they'll do it in the future. I don't know. But that just struck me as really interesting because, the lawyers always win. The lawyers, doesn't matter what side you're on, they always win because they're getting paid to be there. And win or lose, they're probably going to get paid unless they're, getting paid on, what's the term, not commission.
Contingency.
Contingency. That's where a lawyer takes a case, and instead of being paid by the client, as they're racking up their billable hours, they say, look, this is such a good case, I'm going to take it, and I'll get paid a percentage of the winnings. And if I don't win, I'll get paid nothing. So they're taking a risk, but it's a pretty small risk because they're going to look at the case before they take it on a contingency, and they're going to say, I'll take it, but I'm pretty confident I'm going to win, or else they wouldn't take it to begin with. So, but they are taking somewhat of a risk. If there's kind of a surprise later on, maybe they won't benefit from it at all, and they will have given up their money, or their time, I should say, their billable hours. They could have billed another case and made the money. So, it is somewhat of a risk, but they minimize it by understanding what the case is all about up front. So, don't make them out to be bad guys or good guys. They're just hired hands. That's what they are. So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting part of the video, and just one of many facets that we could go down that road with this particular case. And I'll let you make any other comments, Peter.
Sure. Well, I could eventually see Marco making a video about this and comparing himself to Reckless Ben, because Reckless Ben went from being a slackliner, I'll explain that in a second, to now this corporate guy who's going after corporate people and trying to get businesses shut down, which he's done successfully. So I could see that Marco is probably going to make a video about this because he's going to look for clicks and views and extra shares or whatever it might get, and he figured that attaching his name to Reckless Ben would be a pretty smart thing to do, like he's tried to attach his name to Patrick Bet-David. But there's a couple of things. Number one, Reckless Ben actually has talent. So Reckless Ben, previous to doing the videos he's doing now, was doing videos about his discipline and his slacklining capabilities. And I've never seen a Reckless Ben slackliner, but I think I've seen, so for those people that, I'm going to use an imperfect analogy, it's kind of like a tightrope, and he does tricks and does stunts, and he's done some pretty amazing things. He's a world record holder. He's actually held the world record for doing the most backflips on a slack line in 60 seconds, which was 27. So if you think about that, that's pretty impressive. So Reckless Ben starts off having talent. Marco does not. That's number one. Number two, the other thing I'll reference is I knew that there was an MLM component to this somewhere. There had to be a connection. And there is. Bricks and Minifigs, this is the allegations that I've seen so far, which are probably true, because the internet sleuths are pretty good at coming up with some stuff and them being right. Everybody thought that it was the Amen brothers, so Amen and some other guy, that were the Mormon guys that were actually the owners. Those are the ones that are doing the videos. There's one guy who's not doing the videos, and his name is Reed Brim Hall. Reed as in R-E-E-D, Brim Hall. And he's silent, but he must be the money guy or something behind this as well. I think the allegations are he's got 51% ownership, and someone said, well, where's the MLM? He used to be the CFO of a company called Sensi. So Sensi is one that a lot of anti-MLMers go after every once in a while. But I knew there was an MLM component somewhere. I just had to sniff it out. And although it may not necessarily have anything to do with Bricks and Minifigs and this thing, I just felt that there has to be an MLM component somewhere, and it wound up being in this Reed Brimhall guy, previously being pretty connected in the MLM world, specifically with Sensi. So anyway, so that's it. And the idea that a lot of it's tied into the Mormon mentality, and I'm going to make another prediction. One of the things that Reckless Ben doesn't know a lot about, apparently, is how litigious the Mormon church will be. And he said on one of his last videos, I think that these Bricks and Minifig things is like a way for the Mormon church to launder money or do something with money. And I'm like, okay, Reckless Ben, if you want to get your ass sued where it sticks, you start making those allegations, and the Mormon church is going to come after you because they don't play. So you could play around with a whole bunch of different things, but making those kind of allegations against the Mormon church is going to be your downfall if you do something like that. And I don't know if he's going to pay attention to that or not, but I think he's got his eyes opened a little bit, and maybe some people will, shed some light under him so he doesn't do anything stupid. Because if he makes an allegation like that, even if it's real, he's going to wind up in court big time. Because the Mormon Church, the LDS, they don't play, and they sue a lot of people, including a guy who runs like Mormon stores and another gal, lots of people. So anyway, so that's it, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of accusations out there against the Mormon Church and money laundering and all kinds of those kinds of financial things. There's a lot of suspicion, let's say, and a lot of accusations. So yeah, you do have to tread carefully as far as making absolute statements, which is something that's really the main thing that got Marco in trouble with all those companies that sued him. Was he kind of left out words like allegedly and my opinion is this and this looks like that. He just went out there and said, this is a scam, this is a pyramid, this is and made these absolute statements. And when you do that, that's when you're taking your chances. When you're just making 100%. Now I have to correct you on one thing, Peter, and that is Reckless Ben has a lot of physical talent, and so does Marco, because Marco has now pulled his shoulder out of joint twice.
Wow.
The first time was I think 3 years ago. He started lifting weights, and he was doing, and this is on his own videos, he's describing this. He's trying to do an overhead press, while he's sitting on a bench, and he's putting 2 dumbbells above his head. And the way that you normally do that, if it's a heavy weight, of course, because Marco is always stupid, he chose a very heavy weight. And so the way you do that is you sort of put the weight on your knee, and then you lift your knee and you pull your arm up so you can rest the weight up above your shoulder and then press up. And you normally do that, one arm at a time. So he did it with his, I don't know if he did his left arm first or whatever, but anyway, he's left-handed, but he pulled his right arm, his shoulder out of socket, because when he tried to put the weight up above his shoulder, it actually went behind his shoulder, and it just pulled his shoulder out of joint. And he made a video one time about, he went to the hospital, and it took him forever to get through the emergency room and how much it hurt and all this stuff, and he wore a sling for a few months and all this. And then I think it was earlier this year, I think he was just playing with his nieces or something, but his shoulder went out of joint again. And once you do it once, you're very susceptible to it happening again, because you cause damage in the tendons and ligaments, and now it's always kind of loosey-goosey no matter what happens. But that's Marco's physical talent. Reckless Ben might have the record for backflips on a slack line, but Marco is trying to beat him with pulling his shoulder joint out of joint as many times as he can. So that's just a little correction for you, Peter, about Marco's physical prowess, let's say.
Physical ability, yeah. I kind of remember the idea that we said that, well, I'm going to bring the shoulder thing up in a second, but I remember that video because they said Marco kicked his own ass, and I think he remembers me saying that. Well, there is a little bit of similarity in a couple of the videos that you'll probably watch. You'll see that Reckless Ben had hurt his shoulder, and when they did what everybody would consider to be an inappropriate, probably even illegal search and seizure of his Airbnb, without the way they did it, one of the cops went to touch Reckless Ben, and he moved him around a little bit, and he re-dislocated the shoulder. So there is the dislocated shoulder comparison, I will have to admit to, between Reckless Ben and Always Stupid Marco. But having said that, I think that's where the athletic ability stops. so I think, or maybe the idea that Marco was talking about ladyboys and maybe kicking his ass because of he might have been in the hospital. I'm not really sure of that comparison, but we'll see. But anyway, ladyboys, by the way, in Thailand. That was Marco's claim to fame. So back to you. So what else is happening?
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that. I didn't pick up that he actually dislocated Reckless Ben's shoulder. I know he grabbed him kind of roughly.
Well, Reckless Ben had a dislocated shoulder already. So when the guy grabbed him and he moved it, it kind of irritated his shoulder.
Wow, yeah, I didn't hear that. That's interesting. That wasn't in the video I sent you, was it? Did I miss that, or was that in a different video you listened to?
It was in, well, it may have been in the video, but maybe it wasn't highlighted. In other videos, it was highlighted where, Reckless Ben, injured his shoulder again based on that SWAT that they did with that search warrant.
Yeah, well, I know they were very rough with him, probably much rougher than they needed to be. And they were very aggressive as far as making sure that Reckless Ben was separated from all the others that were, removed from the Airbnb, that they couldn't talk. Because I think with the police, and I think they really believed this. I really think that they believed that Reckless Ben was directing them to do all these additional things, and all of these people said, no, I'm just a fan of Reckless Ben, and I wanted to help him. He couldn't do these things, so I wanted to do it. He didn't talk me into it. I wanted to do it, and I offered to do it. So it wasn't that Reckless Ben sort of handed off what he was trying to do to these people. They said, no, I took my own initiative, and I told Reckless Ben, I'm going to do this for you, which is probably legal. Now, how much Reckless Ben cooperated with that, I'm not a lawyer, so it's going to be, that's just another one of those really interesting legal aspects. But, when the police arrested all these people, well, I don't think they formally arrested them, but I think in the real world they did arrest them, because they put them in handcuffs, they took them to the police station, they made them sit in these rooms for hours on end, came in and visited them multiple times. I guess maybe technically they didn't arrest them. They didn't say the words "you're under arrest," but they confined them for an exorbitantly long period of time. And I think probably a lawyer would be able to say that was, in practical terms, an arrest. Because if they're arresting you, not the legal term, but the common English word, then you're arrested. And they really talked to these people multiple times that night that they confined them, let's say, and trying to get any one of them to say, yeah, Reckless Ben asked me to do this for him. And none of them would do that. None of them, and these were all pretty young people. At least most of them, I think, were very young. And they didn't budge. I mean, they all said, no, I'm a fan of Reckless Ben, and he didn't ask me to do this. He didn't even come up with the idea of, because part of this thing with this sign across the street was they wanted to put the sign up, and then they were going to hire a drone guy, and the drone guy was going to, make a video of it, and then they would put that on a GoFundMe page to try to raise money for Reckless Ben. That was the original idea. But then they had to kind of change it, because then they all decided, or at least some of them decided, to sue the police and maybe this Josh Johnson guy that owned the store, and maybe even the corporation, do a civil lawsuit. And they needed money for that, and they were going to do that. Originally, I think, well, actually, the way it went, Peter, was originally they were going to make this drone from this sign that they were putting up across the street to actually raise the money for the old guy that had cancer. Because the police told them, figure out another way of raising money. So they said, well, why don't we do a GoFundMe? Let's make up a sign. Let's do a drone video and try to raise money for this old guy. And that was just another complication of this whole interaction that eventually now they're having to raise money for their own lawsuit. So, and by the way, I just checked while you were talking. It's kind of leveled out. So, they're going to need to get some more publicity, because it's now up to 126,000 instead of 124 that I saw yesterday. So it's only gone up by 2,000 in about a day. It's been about a day since I've looked at it. So, unless it gets a shot in the arm from, someone like CoffeeZilla, someone of that stature on YouTube. When I say stature, I mean followers. I don't mean, because I don't think that CoffeeZilla He knows a lot, but he also doesn't know a lot. But the thing is, he gets real eyeballs on his videos, unlike Marco. And he also probably gets people that aren't broke like Marco, because Marco's goons, most of them are just flat broke, and they can't come up with the money even if they wanted to. Whereas I think CopyZilla probably, just based on sheer numbers, is going to be able to come up with more money from his followers. So anyway, there's, and by the way, I just checked right before the show, and I haven't read the stories yet. There are some new MLM stories, by the way. Next week we get back into MLM more, which is our normal theme. But this was fun to get a little bit off the course and talk about MLM on the periphery. But there are some very recent stories. I just haven't been able to to look at them in detail. And people can do some homework on this if they want to. If you go to behindmlm.com and look at some of the recent, particularly MLM stories, we don't do much of the crypto MLM because there's just so many of them. It's all the same story over and over. But there's some where there's been, some pretty heavy settlements, like $1 million settlements and things of that nature. Our friend Trayvon is kind of on the periphery involved in some of these, so it'll be a good show next week too, Peter, and we can talk about some of this MLM and some of the OGs, as they call them, right? The old guard MLMers like Trayvon. He's part of one of those stories.
Did connect.
So we can revisit that. So anyway, I'll let you make any comments on any either new topics or the stuff we talked about, and I think our time is our self-imposed roughly hour and a half maximum is I think it's been more than used up on this show. So go right ahead, Peter.
Well, this is good because there's a lot of lessons here, not just MLM stuff, but also life in general. I think this Bricks and Minifigs thing could be basically like a case history course. If I was a college student, I would want to be watching this because it really has a lot of really smart lawyers that are giving their real life opinions, and it's playing out live. I mean, we're watching it literally like the Truman Show live. And who knows where it's going to go? It could take a lot of twists and turns, and hopefully no one gets hurt. So lots of people getting hurt financially, but hopefully it doesn't resolve into something getting stupid hurt, because there was like when they did the search warrant, they actually had guns drawn on these young kids. Guns drawn. You hear a woman say, like young kid, like a young woman, who says, the first time I ever had a gun pointed at my face. You'd say, well, this is out of control. But that's what happens when things are escalated and where they're not supposed to be. But Scott, why don't you give out your website one more time, and I'm going to recommend that people find us on Building Fortunes radio channels on Facebook and go to YouTube, and if there's a like or a share, do that. And if there's a subscribe, do that as well, because this way at least we can get more exposure with all this great information. So Scott, back to you.
Well, great, Peter. Sounds good. Yeah, if people go to Facebook, and it's kind of like the hub of all my other stuff. All the links to my websites, my YouTube, some other videos, like I mentioned earlier. That's the center of everything. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I don't put a bunch of personal stuff on YouTube, so you don't have to go, searching for stories or anything. The pinned story is the one that I mentioned earlier, my input to the FTC. So it's all right up front. You don't have to go looking and scrounging around for stuff. So I really do use my YouTube channel differently than most people. It's not a bunch of just personal stuff. And I don't want to bury stuff. I want it to be all on page one, so to speak. So if you go to facebook.com/Stop the Amway Tool Scam, all one word, Stop the Amway Tool Scam, that's where you'll find all those links and all that information, like my email, my phone number, all that stuff. And everybody but Stupid Marco is more than welcome to call me. So, during normal hours. I don't want that one in the morning call like Stupid Marco, maybe you, Peter. Let's be reasonable about it. But I know a lot of his goons are unreasonable, so I have to mention that just to cover the bases. So Peter, thank you, and a great show again.
We'll see everybody next week.
Wow! You've been listening to the Scott Johnson Radio Show on Building Fortunes Radio and the Humongous Radio Network. If you want to listen to this again or tune in to the other radio shows, you'll be able to hear the Scott Johnson Radio Show on the Humongous AM and Humongous FM Radio Network and on all major platforms, such as Amazon's Audible and Apple Podcasts, Spotify and iHeartRadio, and on many of your favorite podcasts. Scott, Peter, and I are glad you listened in. Always, Stupid Marco Moukhaiber probably listened in too, but since he's being sued by Primerica, and because he's a socially manipulating online troll with a diminishing YouTube subscriber base, he's on listen-only mode here on the Scott Johnson Radio Show. Share this show with the people that are important to you. Thanks again for listening in, and go make the world a better place.